Okay, we are in part 3, the presenter. Boy, this is all about the instructor here. Is that right? Let's see what this is talking about. Your responsibility is to lead and to help your students to have a great learning experience, which means you're going to class, you're going to the program, you're going there with a vision, with a goal, with a plan. You know exactly what you're going to do. And Brian, you did like an amazing job answering the question that had to do with like, well, if a person's a follower and they're not the charismatic, they're not all those, how do they handle it, the class, because they're not going to be, step on anybody's toes. And you're saying, well, that's what Micro Enterprise is about. We create. We're the leaders, right? We're creating the content. We're the industry experts in the content to give you the tools that you need to make the presentation, to create the experience, so that you as an instructor can make that presentation and can do it effectively, and not be stressed out to try to defend something that's not going to be your product itself. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you have the right material, that you are properly trained to give them that great learning experience. Show them what to do, where to go, and how to get there. We'll talk more about it. We're going to be sometimes talking about something now that we're going to talk about it again later on. But I can't emphasize enough how important it is to use a professional type of program. Obviously, this is all we do, is create training programs for the electrical industry, the solar industry, and the low voltage industry. And that's what we're about. There's nothing else we're thinking about. We're thinking about how can we make the graphics better? What about the text? What about the author's comments? Is there anything that we can do to make as a package, the DVDs, to put it together so you as the instructor will be able to have the questions, have everything structured to make it work. And with that, then you'll be able to tell them what we're doing today. How are we going to get there? Then we can get the feedback. Did you learn what we did, that we were talking about? So let's continue going here. Show them what to do. Lead them where to go. And how to get there. Students are easily intimidated, are concerned about being treated unfairly, and often struggle with feelings of being unimportant. You got to realize that you're there and you have this group and you're the leader. So therefore, the authority, is up there. And you got to be aware how they're feeling. You got to disarm them. You got to make them relax. That's what I try to do. I meet them before the class. And, oh, man, it's the first time I've been in your class. I said, listen, you're going to have a great time. It's going to be a lot of fun. Don't worry. But, I hope I'm not. No, you're going to be fine. Just be fine. So you need to be able to disarm them. You need to be able to lead them, but they can feel comfortable. That's your job. You're the one that's going to. They're afraid. Next slide. Be sure that students feel welcome, feel you respect them, and know you treat them fairly. It's interesting. I had somebody come to me like 20 years later at a seminar that had taken my seminar 20 years prior. And I was in Atlantic City doing an estimating program, let's say 20-something years ago. He came up to me and he said to me, he says, you know what? He says, I'll never forget the very first time I met you. I'm like, oh, okay. He says, I couldn't believe it. I got to the class early. He says, and you were already there. He says, I'm sitting there and I'm really nervous. I'm only 22 years old or whatever the case may be. He says, and you came to me where I was sitting and you introduced yourself and you welcomed me to the class. He says, I've never had that happen before. He says, and I've taken many seminars since, and nobody has ever done that before you, and nobody's ever done that after you. And I want you to know that made me feel important. Now, I'm not thinking of this. I'm just thinking you're here, and I want to talk to you, and I want to relate with you, and I want to, just. What am I going to do? Sit there in my corner over here, and you sit your corner over there, and I get up and I walk, and I just the nature to what I am. But a simple little effort that you make by being there before, and other things that we're going to talk about, they're like, you know what? I think this is going to be okay. This person cares. It really does care. And that's what we're about. We care. And that's what you want to be, a great instructor. You want to let them know. And you know what's a funny story? My wife and I moved from Fort Lauderdale to Orlando 25 years ago. And, I'm busy with 7 kids and running a business and traveling and DVDs and books and just going nuts, right? And I'm not really a thoughtful person. For me to get a Christmas card, that's 50-50, right? Really? Mother's Day, not likely, and birthdays, not really, really good about that kind of stuff. So I'm not like this real romantic kind of guy and all these things. But when my wife got in the car and she was driving to Orlando while I was still at the house, I noticed in the kitchen her favorite cup for hot water. She drinks hot water. I don't know why you drink hot water, but she loves hot water. And I saw she's getting ready. I said, hold on a second. I ran in the house and I picked up her favorite cup and I ran out to the car. I said, listen, you forgot your cup. And she goes, oh, thank you. That simple little thing, to this day, she'll probably tell you, it was something that was very touching that I somehow, through all the chaos, was thinking about her. It's those little tiny things that you do for somebody that you would think it's not even important at all. But for somebody in the classroom, that was a big deal. That little touch, hey, listen, I remember having people come to my class and they're just stressed out, like the state of Florida exam, where you're 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night for 7 days. I mean, this is a very, very stressful event. And sometimes after a day or two, they're like, listen, I can't handle this. I'm not going to take the test. I would say, listen, Holt, let's go outside the classroom. You guys work these problems. I would take them outside the classroom, and we'd walk around the hotel complex. We talk. And if it didn't feel right, I'd walk them around the hotel complex one more time. Calm them down, relax. Say, listen, you're going to be fine. If you don't take the test, for sure you fail. Do you realize that? I mean, mathematically, just make the math here. You fail. You don't take the test. You take the test, what's the worst thing you could do? You learn information. You gain a skill. I mean, failures, that's not a failure. That's just an exercise like, okay, now I see how the process works. So don't give up on yourself. You don't know that you're not going to pass because sometimes, we think something, it's nearly that. Our performance, Brian House, you did a race a few months ago, and you thought your second lap said, it was terrible. I couldn't believe it. I bonked out and the whole thing. And then what happened? You look at your time, I'm like,
fastest lap.
Well, that was faster than the first lap. So we don't know. But see, that's where the leader comes in. That's where the instructor comes in. You don't want anybody to fall apart. You don't want anybody to leave without you at least making, guess what? I did the best I could to save this person. And I have people who ultimately came back, took the test again and again and again, and they ultimately passed the test. So little tiny things, recognizing them as they walk in, especially in the beginning, can make a big difference. Okay, here's me standing on a platform, elevated. I don't like to be on an elevated platform because it kind of makes me feel disconnected, but let me give you some feedback. Though this is not the time to give you the feedback, let me explain this. If you're ever in a scenario where you're going to be in a large group, okay? Anytime you get more than like 100 people or 150 people, as much as you don't feel comfortable being elevated 6 inches or let's say 3 feet off the ground, I've done studies. I've been in large classes where I sat on the ground and I walked around like my normal self going up and down. And let's say for the morning break, until the morning break. And then I got up on top of the platform and I did my thing there. Then after lunch, I asked the people, listen, guys, which would you prefer that I have? Universal. Mike, we want you on the stage. So it's not me. I don't like being on the stage. I'm not comfortable being elevated like that. But it's not about me. And so I have to learn myself. And now I don't mind it because guess what I know? I know that they can see me better. They can see my body language and they can relate to that. So unrelated to this conversation, look at the photo here. The point here that I'm trying to make here in the context of this conversation, which was being intimidated, make them feel welcome. You can, in a classroom setting, in a general way, just have a way of mannerism and a way of looking at them and saying something to them that they can feel special. It's strange that when I do a survey of people to find out how many people felt that I was looking at them directly and talking at them directly, I would have thought it would be a small number. Almost everybody felt that because I am looking over here and I am looking over there and I am looking and I'm looking in the back and I'm saying back there and then I'm looking over here on the right-hand side. So I am making that awareness. So therefore they feel part of the connection with me. So subtle things, which you talk more about, but you want them to feel like there's a connection there. You care. Let's go to 3.1, key elements of a great instructor. Credibility. Where does credibility come from, guys? Where does it come from? Anybody? I'm throwing this out on you, but I mean, I'm just throwing hard because you guys aren't expecting this question. What do you think the credibility when you're up there speaking, where does it come from?
For me, it's genuineness.
Okay, genuine. What else?
It's confidence in what you're teaching.
Genuineness, confidence.
Ooh, yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Confidence, knowledge, mannerisms.
To me, it's being prepared. You're prepared for that class. They know you are prepared. You're ready for that material. Might not know anything else, but for that material. When they'll trust you, and they'll trust your ideas because you have credibility. Now, that means that guess what? Can you, what was the word we were using? What was an S word that we were talking about earlier? You don't want to do that. You don't want to,
Snowball?
No. Where you say something is not really true. You're making a general statement. Speculate. I'm sorry. I know. So as soon as you speculate, right? As soon as you just lost credibility.
That's right.
As soon as you're not prepared, the slide, if anybody's taught, you can fall behind on the first slide because something happened. And guess what now? Now you're bumbling, you're behind, you're stressed out, you're sweating, you're making mistakes, you're no longer in the zone, you're not focused, and that happens oftentimes because you're not prepared. You never want to go there, okay? So number one is credibility. That's a great instructor. You're ready for them. You are prepared. 2, common ground. Frame the goals on a common ground and describe the benefits of the position you're advocating. When I teach a class, and when I taught a class for the young kids that were in the 7th grade through the 10th grade or something like that, this is, first of all, I have to build some credibility with them. Immediately, they got to feel like somehow connected. And I told them about my story. I told them about my life. I didn't have a father. I struggled with this. And probably a lot of those kids in that classroom actually connected to a lot of my life, because these are a lot of times disadvantaged children in those kind of settings inside here. They connected with that. Then we came up with a common ground. We came up with, listen, I want you to be successful. Everybody wants to be successful. They want somebody to believe in them. So figure out a way to have a common ground. Okay? Key elements of a great instructor. Valuable information. Support your position with striking data mixed with compelling stories, examples, and images. It's the package. You're excited. You're like, oh, man, I'm going to knock these guys out. Right, Ryan?
Absolutely.
Brian? I mean, you say, oh, I got some images. I got some photos. I got some stories. I'll go to a class, and my wife says to me, why do you do that? I'll talk to somebody on the phone, and they want me to do the presenter. And I'm telling them, okay, I'll do that. I say, listen, this is going to be the best seminar you've ever had anybody ever teach in your life. You're going to be like, man, am I glad to have you. My wife's like, why are you so arrogant? I can't believe you talk about that. You know what that does to me? When I tell somebody before they've ever seen me ever before, and they're just like a person in the middle that's processing all of this, because they're doing this here. So they have some authority, They're kind of negotiating, but they're not an electrical person. They're just kind of bouncing this all around inside there. I don't know what they're thinking, but they're thinking, he's a little ballsy, you know what I mean? I want to come to the class and watch it. I want to see if this guy is as good as he says he's going to get. What does it put on my position? It means, listen, to impress somebody, you've already told them you are going to be impressed. That takes a lot of work. So what I've done is what? I put a huge amount of pressure on me. I have to clearly exceed anybody's expectations, no matter how high they thought it was going to be. I'm going in there thinking, oh boy, I know she's going to be there. I know they're going to be in there. And when I'm talking to the people before the class, I said, you know what? It's going to be the best class you ever had. You're going to have an unbelievable amount of time. But part of that is also called brainwashing. Okay? It's also called brainwashing because people do feel, they will think what they're told in advance. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. That's actually studies that show that. Brian?
I was just going to say, I've actually been in the seminar where you're teaching, where you've told people that, and I've heard people and talked to people like, he thinks he's pretty good. Well, there's like 5 of us here that came just because we want to see how good he is. Because everybody's saying he's good, and it's like, oh man, well that worked pretty good if you got 5 extra people to show up by telling them how good he was, The plan worked.
Yeah. So one Good information, set it up. Let's take a look at the slides here. Support your position with striking data, mixture compelling stories, examples of, make it just a plan. You know what? I've had a couple guys say this to me, kind of people that have known me for a long time. Hey, Mike, that was a good performance. Or they say, hey, Mike, that was a good show. Because it is what, right? It is a performance. I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to play drums in a band. You know, I always wanted to do that. I wanted to be a performer. So what am I doing? I'm on stage. I mean, I am performing. I am an actor. There's a lot of things that I'm doing in the classroom setting. Like I said, I'm acting a certain way, and it's like, no. There is a performance that's taking place to keep them entertained. So you have to do that to be a great presenter. Next one. Understanding of emotion. You know, you got to understand that people are just people. And I don't care if you're looking at adults. All men are little boys. All women, they're little girls. And they have all that child emotion inside them, and they're hurt, and they're afraid. And you got to recognize that you got to connect with people at that emotional level. And when I see somebody who's disadvantaged or who whatever struggling is out there, you'll see I will give that person a lot more attention than the one that's getting straight A's. The one, the guys, I don't care. Those guys, I give you work to keep you busy. I mean, just to keep you going, because you're already so smart, you get it done in 25% of the time. What am I going to do with you? We'll talk more about that later on. So when people see that you're taking care of everybody and you're helping those that are struggling, other people will start helping the struggling ones as well. Let's go on. Introduction. Commit to offer your knowledge, talent, ideas, wisdom, openly showing a desire to help. I don't know if instructors... I heard a story from somebody recently that, I think it was Paul at my office, said that she was working in some facility and the assistant manager couldn't do anything because the manager never taught the assistant manager anything. And so things were not going real well. The manager wasn't there. Then the assistant manager didn't know exactly what to do. And so she went up to the manager and said, hey, listen, if you train the assistant manager to understand these tasks, well, then what's going to happen is they won't have to bother you. He said, well, if I train her to do my task, well, then they'd have my job. And that was the first time I thought, wow, I never thought that somebody would hold back information from somebody. And I don't know, can you think would an instructor ever try to hold information back from students? Is that a possibility that people do that?
Not a good one.
Yeah, so I didn't know if some people watching this are like, well, I don't want to tell them everything because maybe other instructors, and so I want to keep this information kind of private.
Well, I think keeping it within the scope of the class is important. If you've set guidelines, if you're doing a class on grounding and bonding, for example, and you set the limitation that we're only covering solidly grounded systems, then sure, you're going to hold back information on ungrounded systems. But to intentionally limit somebody's understanding just to limit them, I can't see any instructor worthy of the name doing that.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, I was told a long time ago that if you want to be a success, you have to have a successor. And so I'm always trying to work myself out of a job.
That's a good one. Well, you guys come up with some amazing things. Well, all I can take out of this is Ryan, you and I relationship. And the very first time we met, back in the back of the church parking lot, we're sitting in the car. And I probably told you the story how I worked with a guy named Joe McPartland, ECNM magazine. Mm-hmm. And Joe was the guy. And I wanted his job, which I did get. I've been with ECNM now for 35 years or something like that. And he did everything he possibly could to help me. I was stunned. I'm thinking, you're an idiot. I want your job. And of course, he wasn't worried about Mike Holt. He wasn't worried about, I didn't know. I'm thinking you should be worried about me, that kind of stuff. And I learned a lesson from him. It's like, wow. And I've done, I think, everything I possibly can to help anybody's careers. Eric, your career, Brian, Ryan, and I've learned that's just what I want to do. So I bet you there got to be some instructors that are kind of like maybe keeping information away from other instructors. Because, well, if I teach those guys how to do this, then they might not need. Listen, be open. Be committed to the student, the knowledge, pass it on. Don't hold it back. Don't even worry about it. Don't have proprietary information. Just make sure you make a difference in the industry. That's all we're talking about.